Hello! In this video tutorial I want to teach you how to create the simplest neural network imaginable. You will learn the fundamental concept you'll be able to apply to the future more advanced neural networks that we will explore in the future videos. It will be deceptively simple and you would think that it's borderline obvious, like it's so simple that it basically involves just multiplying two numbers. But in the future we will build on top of this idea to build much more powerful and interesting stuff. So without further ado, let's get started. Our goal with building a neural network is to create something that can make a prediction. It will be able to look at the input data and predict some kind of output data. For example, based on the yesterday's stock price, it would be able to predict the tomorrow's stock price. Or based on the weather outside, it would be able to predict, I don't know, whether people will be able to wear coats, whether people will decide to put on coats. So, in other words, our goal is to make a program that can take input data and transform it into prediction. In this case, as we are only getting started, we will use only one data point and output only a single prediction. Other networks can take a lot of data points, many features describing, for example, the health of a person, like his blood glucose level, his age, etc. And they would be able to predict whether or not a person has diabetes, for example, or will develop it in 5 years. So there can be many inputs and many outputs, but in the simplest case, we just only need one data point and output a single prediction. So how would you transform a single input into a single output? Well, it might be surprising, but all we need to do is to multiply the input number by so-called weight. We will multiply it by one number to scale it, and as a result we will have an output prediction. So this is the formula that you need to understand. Input multiplied by weight equals output. For example, if I want to predict whether or not you're going to watch the movie, we can just take its IMDb rating, multiply it by 10, and as a result we will have a probability of whether or not you will watch the movie. Obviously many problems are not that simple and have many variables, and this simple formula can't possibly be 100% accurate, but this represents very well the idea that of how neural networks work. And on top of that we will later have multiple inputs, multiple weights, and take into account much more information to make much more clever, much more precise predictions. But now this is the formula and that's all we need to understand. So, weights. Take input, multiply by weight, create output. So what are these weights? Think of them as a volume knob determining the sensitivity between the input and the output. You're taking the input value and scaling it. If weight is if weight is between 0 and 1, it will divide the input and make it smaller. If the weight is huge, it can make even a tiny input into something into a much larger number. If the weight is negative, it will reverse the input. So it can do quite a lot of things to modify the input to make it match the output. And where do they come from? How do we learn about weights? At first you wouldn't know what these are and how do you calculate them. Well, this is basically our purpose. This is why we learn about machine learning. This is why we come up with all sorts of creative ways to so-called train neural networks, and there are many techniques we will explore that will allow us to update the weights and make them accurate. So the idea is that we start with completely random weights, absolutely random. It doesn't matter what they are at the beginning, and we use these random weights to make predictions, to predict the output of the neural network. Obviously it's not going to be correct because the weights are random, but we will be able to see if our predictions was too high or too low. And then we will be able to use this to calculate our error. So if the prediction is very different from if the correct answer is very different from what we wanted, the error is high. If it's very close, it's very low. And then this error can be used to change the weight to minimize the error the next time it tries to predict this value. So you try something, you try to make prediction, you look at how much you messed up, and you use this information in a mathy way. You will see a formula later that tells you how to change the weight to make it more optimal and minimize the error next time. Basically, the way you train a neural network is that you go through this process many times. You feed it a lot of data, many examples, like in case of movies, maybe you feed it 100 movies with as inputs, and outputs will be whether or not you have decided to watch the movie. So you will have a lot of inputs, a lot of outputs. The neural network will try to predict the outputs you already know based on the inputs you already know. That way you will be able to calculate the error and update the error, and hopefully our weights eventually will be close enough to the truth. They will be able to correctly predict whether or not we will watch the movie. And whenever we want to predict a new example, something the neural network has never seen before, it will simply use these weights and hopefully output the correct result. I hope this was easy enough to understand. So let's move on to creating our simplest neural network in code. Here I am using JupyterLab and Anaconda, so that I would have all the libraries installed. But in this tutorial we will need none of the libraries. We will simply write a function. So let's create a function that will be called ANN. That stands for Artificial Neural Network. Let's type def ANN. It will accept two arguments, inputs and weights. What it will do, as you can probably guess from the slideshow, it will simply calculate prediction that we want by multiplying inputs by weights. In this case, we are going to use array of inputs and the array of weights. So if we want to get only the first only one input and multiply it by only one weight, we will simply take the first input in the array of inputs and the first weight in the array of weights. Please don't be confused by this. I will explain why this is and why it matters later. For now, all you need to know is that we are multiplying two numbers, and we will represent them as arrays of each of them containing one number for convenience, because it's going to be very easy to modify in the future and extend it to more complicated situations. So now we will need to return this prediction, like so. Excellent. And that's it. I know it doesn't look like much, but this is the first neural network that you have ever written. And in the future we will just extend this function to make it more fancy and advanced and be able to do more stuff. So once you have, this is called, in other words, a model. It is a neural network and it will be able to model all sorts of data. So the next step is to use it to predict things. We will simply plug inputs into it and weights into it, and then we will make our predictions. We will create inputs array, puts. Let's say it will contain only one movie with one value, so its rating on IMDb is 7.5, and let's say we will create array of weights. Again, only one weight, it will be 10. I just made this weight up. It could have been anything, and we would have updated it as the neural network learns. But you can probably guess that 10 is a pretty reasonable weight to make up, because if IMDb ratings between 0 and 10, then multiplying them by 10 will give you, give or take, a percentage. That's not how you usually initialize weights, but in this example it will be good enough. So let's make a prediction. Prediction equals, we will use our model to predict the output, and we will pass it our inputs and our weights. And finally, we will want to output the result. Print prediction. Ta-da! So that's our prediction. Our neural network thinks that there's 75% chance that you will go watch a movie. Is it correct? Probably not enough information to tell, but this is how it works. This is the general idea, and that's it. So we accept an input variable as an information and use a weight variable as knowledge to make our prediction. So information is basically like you would, weights are basically, think of them as knowledge that you have in your head about the world, and inputs are the information that you see in front of your eyes, and you use your knowledge to make sense of this information. That's it. That's what a neural network does. It multiplies input data by a bunch of weights in all sorts of fancy ways, or in this case in a simple way, to make a prediction. You can use that kind of network to predict all sorts of stuff. You can predict that the probability of whether the people will wear coats today based on the outside temperature, or you can maybe predict whether your football team is going to win based on their track record, and that's it. Of course, these challenges are much more complex that can be represented by multiplying two numbers. And as I've said, in the future videos, we will make larger, more complicated networks that will take more inputs and more weights, but fundamentally they will work using the same principle. Awesome, so that's what I wanted to tell you about in this video. I'll see you in my future tutorials and tell you a lot more about deep learning. I hope you're enjoying this series, and I'll see you next time.